How many people think that government is in general an evil influence? The Bible says that government is of God and that God implemented it to restrain evil. I'm not an anarchist at all. Now, where we will all agree is that, to me, consolidation of power at every level should be minimized. What makes America free? What is it that has made us the freest nation on earth? What makes our Constitution so special? It's a concept that is the absolute foundation of our Constitution, but it's never mentioned in the document. But when I say it, you'll all recognize it. Can anybody tell me what this concept is? And Steve, you be quiet. That's the absolute foundation of our freedom.
Personal sovereignty, individual responsibility.
We were created for a moral and just society.
10 Commandments.
Declaration of Independence.
Those are all good, but not quite right on.
Liberties.
What's the foundation of the Constitution that makes us free that's never mentioned in the Constitution?
The Bible.
Limited power.
That's good too. Who said that?
Limited power.
No, well, close. It's a separation of powers concept. That's what makes America free. That's what made this so successful, despite the fact that ever since our inception, we've got these blood-oath secret societies working to try to consolidate power once again. They've got all the power, all the money they've ever wanted, and they still cannot succeed. They try it on the national level. They try it on the international level. They've got all the money they want, and they still can't succeed. What is it?
Find the law of gravity, God's law.
So it's a separation of powers concept that makes America free. Lots of people sharing power. Power is spread out to the maximum extent that is practical. That's what's wrong with the system today. It's not that the system, the Constitution, is bad. It's that just as the founders knew would happen, people are trying to circumvent this power-sharing feature, which is the absolute basis of the Constitution and ultimately our freedom. So it's so important to me that we always keep in mind what makes us free and what we should be striving for, which is that power should be separated and those who have it should be accountable to lots of different people. That's what the IRS is doing wrong. They try to be accountable to no one. Well, of course they do that. That's just human nature. So let's just keep focused on the goal that we have to keep these guys accountable, just as a separation of powers calls for. Now, this point also works in international affairs. Let's go up one level. What is the separation of powers concept on the international level? Can anybody tell me that?
Multiple nations.
Yeah, right. It's nationalism. It's the independent power of the sovereign nation state. Now, how was Hitler, Nazi fascism, defeated? A bunch of nations ganged up on the Nazi war machine and brought it down by the war-making ability of sovereign nation states. Sad to say but true. Islamic fascism question. To me, this is exactly analogous to the pre-World War II situation where you had Chamberlain trying to appease Nazi aggression and Winston Churchill being the lone voice crying out that the Nazis had to be opposed early on with force of arms. I don't see why anyone conversant with this fairly recent history can possibly see the Islamic terror problem in any other way. Yes, America was drawn into World War II by the Pearl Harbor attack. Yes, the money masters wanted war because they make money off of war. This is a tough problem. It's not an easy problem that can be resolved down into simple terms. You just have to try to do the best you can with it. I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to allow ourselves to be ruled by guys who would cut the heads off of innocent civilians on TV just to get their way? None of you all are going to go for that. So therefore, you have to say, okay, we're going to do something about it. Then you have to say, well, when are you going to do something about it? Are you going to wait until they have all of Europe? And then it's everybody against us? Are you going to wait until they're here cutting the heads off of people? No. If you're smart, you're going to try to learn from history. You're going to try to be a little more proactive and go fight that war or try to fight that war when it's not on your territory. I don't know what all the solutions are. I know what the negative aspects of this. I'm terribly conflicted about it all. I don't have the answer, but I just wanted to give that perspective. Okay. Now the real story about how I got into all this. In October 1973, I was sitting watching the Watergate hearings with my dad, and he told me a story that drastically changed my life and threw me into this position which I unwantedly occupy today. He told me that a couple of weeks earlier he had been approached by someone claiming to be affiliated with the Nixon White House and asked how he and his friends in the military would feel about a military takeover of the U.S. government, the purpose of which would be to install President Nixon in office for a third term and possibly subsequent terms. And that, of course, is the basis of my first book, New World Order, The Ancient Plan of Secret Societies. He was told there was virtually unlimited money behind the effort and that any military officer that wished to join could name his price. My dad was a technical kind of guy. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force who had taken most of his college at Wright-Patterson Institute of Technology. I was born in Dayton, Ohio, Wright-Patterson. He won a double master's in math and something called control engineering. He ended up his career, he was the designer of the secure communications network for the Pentagon, the number 2 man in the Minuteman missile system, the head of what's now called CQDI, Command, Control, Security, and Communications. He designed the big switch deep in the AT&T Long Lines facility in the mountains of Western Virginia and Mount Weather, the Greenbrier, which of course, the big switch was where the president could cut into all radio and TV broadcasts and speak to the nation without having to go to ask each network individually if he could have time. So they needed him to perpetuate, to bring this thing about. Anyway, my dad died last year, and not once did any media person call him up and ask for an interview to verify what I had to say in my book about his role in President Nixon being forced from office on August 8th of 1974, 32 years and 12 days ago. So after my dad told me this, he and I tried to alert the DC press corps. We actually had an appointment scheduled with Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, the Washington Post reporters who ended up authoring the book and the movie, All the President's Men. But they blew us off and only sent their editor, Bob Fink, down to talk to us. And of course, nothing appeared in the Washington Post about this. They had Watergate all figured out. They didn't need anybody muddying the waters with some vast conspiracy tale. In the months that followed between October 73 and Nixon's resignation in August 74, I continued to try to push the story and got a lot of heat for it. I looked down the barrel of a .38 special, and believe me, that's no fun. It was a time of car chases and paranoia, and during that period I slept with a 9mm handgun under my pillow. And if any of you all have ever done that, you know what I'm talking about. It was a scary time when I feared for my life every day. Then once Nixon resigned, the pressure was off, but it took me quite a while to realize it. I knew that I was going to have to write about this incident and the meaning of it because no one else was going to do so. But I wasn't a writer, so I decided I needed some practice writing, so I started up a small county weekly newspaper in Northern Virginia and ran that for 5 years. It was during this period that I stumbled onto this Federal Reserve gold story. That's why I have to tell this whole story, or else it doesn't fit in. An old guy called me up one day and said, "Boy, have I got a great story for you. There's no gold left in Fort Knox." And I just kind of rolled my eyes because you hear a lot of nutty stuff when you run a newspaper. And you develop the standard response, which is, okay, send me something in the mail. Because the crazy people don't have anything to send. 2 days later, I got a sheaf of papers about yay thick. And this guy was a multimillionaire Ohio farm implements dealer who had just moved to the D.C. area to pursue his hobby. And his hobby was that he knew that the federal government had required an annual physical audit of gold reserves in Fort Knox, annually. But one had not been done since 1957. And so he spent millions of his dollars trying to make that happen, and he ultimately failed. But at least he told me the story, and it took me about 15 years to figure out, what does this have to do with anything? And so anyway, that's when I produced, finally, in about, 1994, produced this book on the horns of the beast, the Federal Reserve and the New World Order. And incidentally, the first book I referred to, some of you all may have read it and not even known what I was talking about. This is what it looked like. And I produce it now in this form, which is for sale back there. Then in 1992 I found out I could make more money freelancing medical breakthrough stories, so I started doing that. Then in 1990 I wrote my first book, New World Order, The Ancient Plan of Secret Societies, which talks about the Nixon coup. Then the horns of the beast, and which is this one. And from this, the Money Masters video came, just so that you know what's going on back there.